Hello creative friends, this is Joy. So I'm continuing this series on turning old books into journals. And here I have this book that I decided I wanted to turn into a journal. So I'm cutting away the book block from the cover. And as I said in the previous videos, this is video 3. I'm showing different ways of binding um, books into journals, and so this is the third way, and I did this on several books. And if you go back and watch the first video in this series, you'll see where I show you all the books that I got from a flea market. I got a whole bunch of books because they were selling them as many books as you can shove into a bag for $1. So I got a bunch of old books from the flea market with the intent of turning them into journals. Like several years ago, I've had them on my bookshelf and finally decided the time is now to do this. And I show you a picture in the first video of all the books that I've turned into journals and what that looks like before and after on my bookshelf. So I'm pretty happy to report that I got all of them turned into journals. And so here I'm trying to cut a piece of chipboard to reinforce the spine and making sure that there's a little bit of room so that I can close the front and back cover. And so once I get it cut down to the right size, I use some Fabri-Tac glue to glue that in to the spine of this book. So I'm really happy the way that all these, books turned out, these journals turned out. And as I said, I'm, doing videos showing you different ways that you can do the binding. And so in this one, I do an super easy sewn binding. And so here I'm making sure that I can close the front and back cover easily, and then that's aligned good, and press that into place. And that will help strengthen the spine. So I got a piece of fabric here. It's Tim Holtz fabric that I wanted to use to cover the spine, and I used some pinking shears to cut the top and bottom so that it had a little bit of a ruffle on the top and bottom, because you're going to be able to see that a little bit. So I marked, as you saw, did pencil marks as to how far the fabric comes over the inside of the cover so that I know where to put the glue. And I'm adding glue all over the spine and the two sides of the cover where the fabric is going to be. And this fabric, I actually have it doubled up instead of using a single layer, which I could have probably been okay with a single layer because I did a single layer on some other books that I turned into journals, and they turned out fine. So I don't know why on this one I kind of left it a double layer, but I did. So I guess because I was thinking with it folded over on either end, it'd give it more of a finished look. But with some of the other journals that I used fabric on and did the cover this way, I just used my pinking shears along the sides as well, and they turned out fine. And this, I figured that the glue would seep through the one piece of fabric and help to glue down the second piece, but not so much. So here I'm going through and trying to add a little glue to the top and the bottom and glue down, make sure my corners are all glued down well to get this piece of fabric glued in place. So that's what I'm doing here, just checking my corners and my edges and just making sure everything is glued down well. So that's what I've done with the cover there. And then I end up measuring the size of the book so that I can see what size I need my papers. So I decided to pull out a bunch of coffee dyed papers that I've had in my stash and to use them for my pages in this particular book. And in some of the other books that I created, I actually ended up using scrapbook paper because I've got tons and tons of scrapbook paper from my scrapbooking days that I've had in my stash for God knows how long. And so I thought, well, it'll come in handy, using those scrapbook papers up, for, turning them into books. So here I'm going through and cutting down the papers to size. And I'm doing a bunch at a time. I mean, I get like to where I get tired of just cutting one piece of paper at a time, so I try to stack up multiple papers and cut them down, and then I fold them up and just double checking the size compared to the book cover. It looks like I got the right size. And then here I did pull out some scrapbook paper also to use because I didn't have, well, for the coffee dyed papers that I had, it wouldn't have made the book very thick. And here I decided that I wanted to also put some pockets in this book. So here are some of the papers I made 3 inches longer than they needed to be, and I scored it at that 3-inch mark, folded it over at the bottom, and then fold it in half, and then cut off where the fold was in the middle of these pockets. And so I did that for 4 because I decided to have 4 signatures. And then I went and glued those pockets down. So that way each signature that I have will have one page that has pockets in it. So here I'm gluing down the pockets for these 4 signatures that I'm going to be creating. And I thought this particular scrapbook paper would work well, I guess, with the coffee dyed papers that I'm going to put into this journal. And then here's the last one. So I've got my 4 pocket pages. I've got my coffee dyed papers, and then I've got my other just regular scrapbook papers that I cut to size and folded in half to put into this journal. I lay out my papers and I start mixing and matching. So here I'm making my 4 piles for my 4 signatures, and then spreading out the papers that I have for each signature so I can mix and match. So here's the papers I'm going to have for each signature, and then I go through and decide how I want what order I want the pages in. So that's what I'm doing here. I'm just putting my different papers in for each signature in the order that I want them in. And I believe I go back and I even cut more scrapbook paper because I think I decided that I could make this a little thicker because this particular journal had such a wide spine. I think it was like a 2.5, 3-inch spine. So I'm just double checking and double counting, making sure I've got it all even, and I'm looking at it to see how that's going to fit in there. And I do want to have, room in the journal so that as I add to it, it doesn't end up being way too thick. But yeah, so here, these are the offcuts from the scrapbook papers that I put into this journal, and I thought, you know what, I could use these as well. I mean, they'll be different sizes, but That's, kind of the beauty of having a junk journal. You can have all different size pages. They don't have to all be the same. So, and already in this journal, they're not going to be the same because some of the pages, like the music papers and stuff, are smaller anyway. So I add those into the journal, or into each of the signatures. I add some of those, and that helps use up some of the offcuts. And I also, you'll see here where I use the offcuts for making tags to put into the pockets. So again, I'm just double checking, making sure I got the papers in the order that I want them in. Adding the extra pages. And rearranging some of the pages as needed. So yeah, if you go back and watch the first video, you'll see like the stack of books that I had on my shelf from the flea market and what they look like, and then after I turn them all into journals, what they look like after. So now that I've got the papers that I want to put in this book, I take another piece of paper. This is just a scrap piece of paper. I measure the size of the spine, and I cut this down because I don't need all this much paper. And I cut it down to the height of my pages. And then I go through and I find the center, and I go a half inch from the top and a half inch from the bottom and draw the line across. And then I also divide up the width of the spine into 5 sections because I need to put 4 signatures into the spine. So I divide it up to where they're evenly spaced to add to this book. And here I'm just, trying to use my phone to calculate the division. And then I draw a line from the top to the bottom. And where those lines cross is where you punch your holes in the spine and in the pages. So here I line this up as best I can with my spine. I use a piece of just foam packaging from some kind of delivery. I don't even remember now where it came from. I've had it for years. I put it underneath because when I go to punch my holes, I don't want to damage anything. And it makes it easier if I have something underneath it when I punch my holes. So here I'm just trying to fold where the spine would be, so I can try to get that right, in where the spine needs to be. I figure if I fold it where the spine folds up, then it'll make it easier for me to figure out how, to get that aligned best. And then once I get that aligned, I clip it on top and bottom just to hold that in place. Double checking, make sure I'm even on the top and bottom and that I've got that exactly where the spine is. And I clip it all the way around, and then I punch my holes where those lines cross. And then once I get all the holes punched, I go back through and lift the book up so I can push the awl all the way through to make the holes bigger, because I don't want to have any problems struggling with sewing these signatures in. So I'm just going through and just making sure that I got those holes in there good. And then I take my template and I also mark at the top a T so I know what's the top so that way something doesn't go wonky, although it shouldn't because everything's carefully measured out, but you just never know. And so I open up my first signature. I put my template in there, making sure the T is at the top. I paper clip it, and then I punch holes in my signatures. So I folded the template along one of the set of holes and just using it to punch all of my holes in my signatures. So once I get my holes punched in my signatures, then I can start binding the book. And I go 4 times the height of the book because what I want to do is I want to leave enough room to add some beads and stuff on the spine. And so once I get the length of the string that I need, I do that 3 more times, so I've got 4 of them. And then I get my needle and I thread my needle. I take the last signature. I start from the back and take the last signature, so I go from the top, from the outside in, and then I go to the next hole, to the next hole, so I work my way down and then I work my way back up. So that way at the top I'm having a little trouble getting the needle through there, through everything. That way when I get back to the top, I have 2 long strings that I can tie off. And when I go through the top to begin with, I make sure I leave enough string so it's like the length of the spine, because I want to add, like I said, beads to those strings when I'm done. So I'm just making sure that I tie it off really good, and I've got my first signature in there. So then I take the next string and I do the same. I go through the top hole, I take my second signature, put that in, go through the middle, go through the bottom, and just make sure my string is my tail that I've left is long enough as the length of my spine, and then I go back up through the middle hole and then back up through the top and then come to the top and tie it off really well. So I do that for all 4 signatures. So this is one way of adding like beads and things to your spine to decorate the spine. And here you can see where off camera I just grabbed all my beads, all my signatures are in, and I added all of my beads to the strings and charms. I then tied it off with a charm at the end. So here I want to decorate the front cover with this rose. And so I thought that it would be easy to just take a stencil on some of this silver paint. And so I got some paint on there, tapped it off, and stenciled, but didn't quite turn out like I had hoped. But you'll see that in a minute. I don't know if well, I must have had too much paint on the sponge because it seeped under, and so I ended up, you'll see how I fix that. So yeah, see, you can see it just looks like a hot mess. I'm like, darn it, the hell. So I decided to go ahead and just paint it all in, and then just make it look like, well, that's what I meant to do. That's what you do with crafting. You just turn mistakes into opportunities and just make it look like that's what you meant to do. There's always a fix for everything. And so, yeah, I also want to do like a little bit of a haze around it. And then I let that dry. And then I came back with the stencil, put it over top, lined it up as best I could, and then decided to get an ink pad and use an ink pad with black to stencil over it. So that's how I salvaged the cover. But you'll see in the next video where I do a different type of a spine dangle or whatever for the journals. And if you saw the first one, you'll see that I did several books like this. And so here, the easiest way to clean off a stencil with archival ink is to spray alcohol on there and just wipe it off. It comes off with alcohol ink, so it's not permanent. You can clean that off. And so I just clean my stencil. Anyway, I hope that you subscribe to see the rest of the last video that I have coming. And I thank you for watching, and we'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.